I still remember that evening more clearly than any birthday, any school prize, or any happy moment I was supposed to treasure. The sky was turning orange when my mother knelt in front of me and adjusted the collar of my shirt. Her hands were trembling, but she smiled anyway, too quickly, too forced. "You're going to stay with Grandpa for a little while," she said softly, brushing my hair to the side. "Just a few days, okay?" I looked at my father behind her. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me, like I was already something he had decided to put away. His hands were inside his pockets, his jaw tight, as if he was holding back words he didn't want to say. "Why?" I asked. My voice came out smaller than I expected. Did I do something wrong? My mother immediately shook her head. No, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. We just need to handle some things, work stuff, adult things. But even at 9 years old, I understood something was off. Adults never said just a few days with eyes that refused to stay steady. The car engine was already running outside. My small suitcase was packed before I even understood I was leaving home. I didn't remember packing it. That scared me more than anything. Grandpa's house was far away, in a quiet town where everything looked older than time itself. The walls were gray stone, the windows tall and narrow, and the front gate creaked like it had forgotten how to welcome people. When we arrived, Grandpa was standing on the porch. He didn't smile. He didn't hug me. He simply looked at me like a judge inspecting a case he hadn't agreed to take. "So this is him," Grandpa said flatly. My father nodded. "We'll be back soon." Grandpa didn't reply. He just stepped aside and opened the door. I stood there holding my small suitcase, waiting for someone to say, "Don't go," or "Come back inside." But no one did. My mother finally hugged me. It was quick, too quick. Like she was afraid if she held on longer, she might change her mind. "I love you," she whispered, and then she let go. I turned to my father, hoping, just hoping, for something. A nod, a promise, a glance that said I mattered. Instead, he opened the car door. That was it. No goodbye. No warning, no hesitation. The car rolled away, leaving dust behind like a curtain falling on a stage. I stood there until the sound disappeared completely. Grandpa didn't move until then. When the silence became heavy enough, he finally spoke. "Come inside." His voice was not kind, not cruel either, just final. The house was colder than I expected. Not temperature, cold, but feeling. Cold. The kind of place where laughter had once existed but had long since been erased. I sat on the edge of a wooden chair in the kitchen while he poured himself tea. He didn't ask if I wanted anything. He didn't ask if I was hungry. He didn't ask if I was scared. Maybe I was supposed to answer those things myself. That night, I waited near the window in the small guest room they gave me. I thought maybe the car would return. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they forgot something important to me. Every passing sound outside made my heart jump. But the road stayed empty. Days passed, then more days. No phone call, no visit, only silence. I stopped asking when they were coming back after the 3rd week. Grandpa never answered anyway. When I asked him once, he simply said, "Focus on your studies." That was his answer to everything. Eat, study, sleep, repeat. At school, I tried to act normal. I told other kids my parents were busy working abroad. It was easier than saying the truth that I didn't know where they were. But children are cruel in ways adults forget. They noticed everything. No mom at pickup again. Where's your dad? Do you even have a real family? Each question was like a small cut that never fully healed. I stopped talking much after a while. At night, I sometimes pressed my face into the pillow so Grandpa wouldn't hear me cry. I didn't know if he cared, but I didn't want to find out. Strangely, he never once told me to stop. He just existed in the next room, reading old legal books. Turning pages slowly like time meant nothing to him anymore. One evening, nearly 2 months after I arrived, I found him sitting outside in the courtyard. The wind was soft, and the sky was turning dark blue. I sat a few steps away, unsure if I was allowed to speak. "Grandpa," I finally said. He didn't look at me. Are they coming back soon?" For a long moment he said nothing. I thought maybe he didn't hear me. Then he spoke, quieter than usual. "People don't always return when they say they will." I didn't fully understand what he meant, but something in his tone made my chest tighten. That night, I stopped waiting by the window, but I never stopped hoping. Not yet. Morning in Grandpa's house didn't begin with warmth or noise. It began with silence so sharp it felt like it had edges. A bell rang at exactly 5:30 a.m. No matter how late I slept, no matter how tired I was from crying the night before, that bell never waited for me. It felt like the house itself demanded discipline. "Wake up." Grandpa's voice came from the hallway, steady and unshakable. I learned quickly that arguing was useless. By the time I stepped into the kitchen, he was already sitting at the table with a cup of black tea and a newspaper spread neatly in front of him. Everything in his life looked controlled, like even his thoughts had been organized into straight lines. "You will attend school at 7:00, he said without looking at me. "Breakfast is at 6:30, be on time." I nodded, even though I wasn't sure he was expecting a response. The first week felt like survival. The second week felt like routine. By the third week, it felt like I had always lived there. But I hadn't stopped missing my parents. I just learned to hide it better. At school, I became the boy from the old house. No one said it kindly. Kids asked questions like they were throwing stones. "Did your parents abandon you? Are you adopted? Why does your grandfather look like a judge?" I never answered. Silence became my shield. If I didn't react, maybe the pain would get bored and leave me alone. But it didn't. One afternoon, 2 older boys blocked my way home. "Say it." One of them smirked. "Say your parents didn't want you." I tried to walk past them. That was my mistake. A push, then laughter. I fell onto the dusty road, my books scattering everywhere. A few kids watched from a distance, pretending not to see. I didn't cry there. I waited until I got home. That night, I sat on the edge of my small bed, staring at my hands. They felt too small for a world this heavy. Grandpa noticed. He always noticed everything, even when he pretended not to. He entered the room without knocking. "Stand up," he said. I wiped my face quickly. "I'm fine." He didn't believe me. He never believed words, only actions. "Show me your hands," he said. I hesitated, then held them out, scraped palms. Dust still stuck to my skin. He looked at them for a long time. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Tomorrow, you will learn how to defend yourself." I blinked. "Defend myself?" He nodded once. "Not with fists, with mind. That is stronger." That was the closest thing to comfort he had ever given me. Days slowly changed after that. Not emotionally, but structurally. My life became even more disciplined. School, study, training. Grandpa started giving me extra books. Not children's books, law books, logic books. Books filled with words I barely understood. "You are not weak," he said one evening while correcting my handwriting. "You are untrained." I didn't know the difference at the time, but I wanted to believe him. Still, the nights were the hardest. There were moments when I would sit near the window again, not because I expected anything, but because my body remembered hope, even when my mind didn't. Sometimes I imagined the sound of my mother calling my name. Sometimes I imagined my father opening the gate. But imagination always ended the same way: silence. One rainy evening I broke. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was just quiet collapse. I came back from school soaked, my uniform dirty, another insult still echoing in my head. I dropped my bag and stood in the hallway, suddenly unable to breathe properly. Grandpa was in his study. I don't even know why I went in. I don't understand. I shouted, my voice cracking halfway. Why did they leave me? What did I do wrong? The room froze. Grandpa slowly closed the book he was reading. He looked at me for a long time, not angry, not surprised. Just tired. You did nothing wrong, he said. That sentence hurt more than anything else, because it meant the truth had nothing to do with me. I sank to the floor. For the first time since arriving, Grandpa didn't tell me to stand up immediately. Instead, he walked over and placed something on the table beside me. A glass of water. Simple, quiet. Then he said almost reluctantly, "People leave for reasons that have nothing to do with the child." I looked up at him through blurred vision. "Do you know why?" He paused, a very long pause. Then he answered carefully, "I know enough." That was all he said. But something in his tone made me realize this wasn't just sadness. It was knowledge, heavy knowledge, dangerous knowledge. That night, I stopped asking when my parents would return, not because I stopped caring, but because I started fearing the answer. I didn't find the truth on purpose. The truth found me. It started on a winter afternoon when Grandpa was out for one of his rare meetings. The house felt unusually alive in his absence, less strict, less watched, like even the walls exhaled. I was supposed to study. Instead, I wandered. Grandpa's study had always been forbidden, not because he said it out loud, but because everything about it told me not to enter. The door was heavy oak, always closed, always silent. Even the air around it felt older. That day, it was slightly open. Just a crack. Curiosity is a dangerous thing when you're lonely. I pushed the door. The room smelled like paper, ink, and something deeper, time itself. Shelves lined every wall, filled with thick legal books, folders, and old case files tied with faded ribbons. Everything was too organized, too intentional. I wasn't searching for anything important. I was just looking. But then I saw it, a drawer left slightly open. Inside were files labeled with names I didn't recognize until I saw one. My surname. My heart slowed. I pulled it out carefully, hands suddenly colder than the room. Custody arrangement. The words blurred for a second as my eyes struggled to understand them. I sat down on the floor and began reading. At first, it didn't make sense. Legal language always felt like another language entirely. But as I kept reading, pieces started connecting like broken glass, forming a picture I didn't want to see. My parents' signatures, court references, financial agreements, and then a line that made my stomach drop. Voluntary transfer of guardianship under mutual consent. Mutual consent. My hands started shaking. "No," I whispered. "No, this isn't right." I flipped pages faster, heart pounding louder than my thoughts. There were more documents, emails printed out, letters, records of disputes, and Grandpa's name, always present, always resisting. Then I saw it, a note written in Grandpa's handwriting. "I object to this arrangement. The child is being used as leverage for financial liquidation and asset protection." My breath stopped completely. Used leverage, asset. I felt like the room tilted. My parents didn't just leave me. They signed me away, not for work, not for hardship, but for something that sounded like money. My vision blurred as anger and disbelief collided inside me. I wanted to rip the papers apart, to deny them, to rewrite reality with my hands. But truth doesn't care what you want. It just exists. Footsteps. I didn't even hear the door open. Grandpa stood there, still, calm, watching me on the floor, surrounded by evidence I was never supposed to find. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he slowly closed the door behind him. "You weren't supposed to see that yet," he said quietly. My voice broke instantly. "Is it real?" He didn't answer immediately. That silence was the answer. I stood up, shaking. "They sold me, is that what this says?" His eyes didn't soften. They didn't harden either. They just carried weight. "Not sold," he corrected, transferred under pressure, but the result is the same for a child. I stepped back like the air had hit me. "I was nothing to them," I asked. My voice cracked. "Just paperwork." For the first time since I came to his house, Grandpa looked older. 12 years ago, he said slowly, your parents were drowning in debt and legal trouble. They were being manipulated by people who don't care about families' only outcomes. He paused. "And they agreed to remove you from the equation." My fists clenched, "so they chose themselves," I said quietly. Grandpa didn't deny it. That hurt more than any confirmation. I felt something inside me break, not loudly, but permanently. Like a rope that had been holding my childhood together finally snapped. I sank into the chair. I waited. I whispered. Every night I waited. Grandpa sat across from me for the first time instead of standing over me. "I know," he said. A pause, then something I never expected from him. I tried to stop it. That sentence hit differently. I looked up sharply. "You did." He nodded once. "I fought it in court. I challenged every document, but the system, sometimes it moves faster than justice when money is involved." His voice tightened slightly, and in the end, I was forced to accept custody in silence. Otherwise, you would have been placed somewhere far worse. I couldn't process it all. My parents had abandoned me, and Grandpa had fought for me, but I had never known. "I hate them," I said suddenly. The words came out before I could stop them. "I hate them for this." Grandpa didn't react immediately. Then he spoke softly, dangerously calm. "Hate will not fix what they did." I laughed once, empty, broken. "Then what will?" He leaned forward slightly. "Strength," he said, "and understanding, because one day they may come back." That sentence froze the air. "Come back," I repeated. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes," he said. "And when they do, you will not be the same child they left behind." I didn't know it then. But something inside me had already begun changing, not healing, not forgiving, transforming. Years don't heal everything. Some years sharpen it. That was what happened to me. I grew up inside Grandpa's house like a project built with discipline instead of comfort. Every morning started with structure, every evening ended with study. Where other kids had toys, I had books. Where others had parents cheering at school events, I had silence and a distant figure watching from the back row. Grandpa, always there, never emotional, never absent. But I changed, not into a child who forgot, into someone who remembered everything too clearly. Grandpa kept his word. Strength, he had said, so I built it. He taught me law the way most people teach survival, cold, precise, unavoidable. Case studies replaced bedtime stories. Court rulings replaced fairy tales. I learned how words could destroy or protect lives, depending on who controlled them. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being just the abandoned boy. I started becoming something else. A student of justice, a reflection of him. By the time I was 19, the house no longer felt like a cage. It felt like preparation. Grandpa rarely spoke about the past anymore, but I noticed things he never said out loud. Phone calls he ended abruptly. Old colleagues who still greeted him with respect. Files he never threw away, even though he said he had retired long ago. One evening, he called me into his study. He was sitting exactly where I once found those documents years ago. Same chair, same silence, but his eyes were different now. He was tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. "They're back in the country," he said. I didn't need to ask who. My parents. The words didn't shake me anymore. They just landed when I asked recently. He replied, "They've started reaching out to old contacts, trying to rebuild their image. They believe time has erased consequences." A slow breath left my chest. "Do they know about me?" I asked. Grandpa shook his head. "Not who you've become." That was the first time I felt something like control over my own story. He leaned back slightly. "They think you are still the child they left behind." I looked down at my hands. Those hands had changed, not physically much, but everything else had. "They want forgiveness?" I asked. Grandpa didn't answer immediately. Then he said something I'll never forget. "No," he said, "they want access." Silence filled the room. Access, not love, not apology. Access to what they had once discarded and now regretted losing. Grandpa stood slowly and opened a drawer. Inside was a thick file, newer than the ones I had found as a child. "This is the final case," he said. I frowned. "Case?" He slid it toward me. Everything they did, every financial movement, every fraudulent signature tied to the custody arrangement, everything I could not use back then without destroying you in the process. My breath slowed. "You kept all of this?" "Yes," he said simply, "because one day they would return." I looked at him carefully. "And what happens now?" For the first time, Grandpa smiled. It wasn't warm, it was final. "Now," he said, "the law remembers what they tried to bury." Court day came like a storm that didn't announce itself. My parents walked into the courtroom expecting something simple. Closure, maybe, or money, or control. Their faces showed confidence, the kind of confidence people have when they believe the past has no teeth. They didn't look at me at first. They didn't recognize me. I stood behind Grandpa as his legal successor, wearing a suit that felt heavier than anything I had ever worn in my life. When my mother finally saw me, her expression changed. Confusion first, then recognition, then fear. "No," she whispered under her breath. My father narrowed his eyes. "Who is that?" Grandpa stood slowly. And for the first time in years, his voice filled a courtroom instead of a quiet house. "That," he said, "is the child you abandoned." The silence that followed was absolute. Documents were presented. Evidence unfolded like a truth that had been waiting years to breathe. Signatures. Transactions, legal transfers, manipulations hidden under polite language. Every attempt they made to speak was met with law, not emotion. And the law did not listen to excuses, it only listened to facts. By the end, they were no longer standing as powerful people trying to reclaim control. They were standing as defendants facing everything they had buried. When the judge's final decision came, it didn't feel loud. It felt irreversible. Financial collapse, legal restrictions, permanent record, and a silence placed over their claims that no future argument could undo. When it was over, my mother looked at me one last time, not with anger, not with pride, with something far weaker. Regret, but regret is not the same as redemption. As they were escorted out, Grandpa placed a hand on my shoulder. "Do you feel better?" he asked quietly. I watched them disappear through the courtroom doors. "I don't feel happy," I said. A pause. "Good," he replied. "That means you understand." We walked out together. Outside, the air felt different. Not lighter, not heavier. Just finished. And for the first time since I was 9 years old, I didn't look back to see if anyone was coming for me. Because this time, I wasn't waiting anymore.